The story begins with a young boy named Dickie, who comes from a very poor family. He has no money, yet his father works tirelessly, day and night, solely to ensure his son can have a bright future. Dickie attends a large, reputable school. However, this is precisely where his real struggles begin. The other children in his class are all very wealthy. Their clothes are clean and new. They possess expensive toys, and they lead lives of great comfort. Dickie, on the other hand, arrives at school wearing worn-out, tattered shoes and soiled clothes, an appearance that causes everyone to look at him differently. His teacher, Miss Yuan, notices all of this and feels deep sympathy for Dickie. She wishes to speak with his father, but Dickie explains that his father is constantly occupied with work, as his mother is no longer in this world. Now, it is just the two of them, him and his father, and for the majority of the time, Dickie is left entirely alone. One day in class, the teacher asks all the children, "What do you want to become when you grow up?" Some say they want to be rich. Others say they aspire to be successful individuals. But Dickie's answer stuns everyone. He says, "I want to be poor." The entire class bursts into laughter, utterly astonished. However, Dickie then explains his reasoning in very simple terms. His father has taught him that if a person is honest, hardworking, and dedicated to their studies, they can earn the respect of others, even if they remain poor. His perspective, though seemingly simple, is profoundly deep. Yet, not everyone treats him with respect. One day in class, when his teacher's pen falls to the floor, Dickie attempts to pick it up and hand it to her. However, instead of saying thank you, the teacher reacts in a peculiar manner. She tells him to put the pen back down and proceeds to pick it up herself, using a cloth, simply because Dickie had touched him. This moment clearly illustrates just how disdainfully people view him. The situation remains unchanged even during the lunch break. A wealthy boy named Johnny shows off his new toy, a robot dog named CJ1. All the other children gather around him, watching with excitement. Dickie stands at a distance, merely observing, for he knows that he could never afford such a toy. At that very moment, some boys begin to mock a girl named Maggie because she looks different from the other children. However, Dickie does not remain silent. He steps forward, stands up to them, and intervenes. Although he himself is frail and poor, he always stands up for what is right. The bullies ignore his words and walk away. Yet, Maggie notices his kind heart, and it is here that a new friendship begins. However, Dickie's troubles are far from over. During gym class, the teacher forbids him from participating, simply because his shoes are old and worn out. Once again, Dickie finds himself sitting alone, but this time, something different happens. A short while later, Maggie comes over and sits down beside him. With a smile, she explains that she had deliberately pretended to forget her own shoes just so she could sit with him. This small moment demonstrates that Dickie is no longer entirely alone. Then, Maggie asks him, "Are all your shoes old like this?" Without a moment's hesitation, Dickie tells her the truth. "Yes," he explains. His father had retrieved these very shoes from the trash. He loves his father deeply, respects him immensely, and feels absolutely no shame regarding him. And yet, deep within his heart, he harbors a small, quiet wish. He wants new sports shoes so that he too can play just like the other children, for he loves playing very much. Meanwhile, on the other hand, his father is working in dire conditions at a construction site. He is exhausted and looks frail, and is unable to handle the heavy workload. Seeing this, his boss decides to fire him. However, the father immediately folds his hands and pleads with him. He says, "I need this job desperately. I have to buy a fan for my son. He cannot sleep in this heat." The boss is astonished. He asks, "Why are you enduring such hardship? Why are you sending him to a private school?" Then, the father offers a simple yet heart-touching explanation. He says, "I don't want my son to live the kind of life I have lived. I want him to have opportunities far better than mine." Hearing this, the boss is moved to emotion and decides to give him one last chance. That night, the father returns home on his old bicycle, carrying a fan with him. Their home is not a nice one. They live in an unfinished, dilapidated building. The moment Dickie sees the fan, he is overjoyed. He can hardly believe that his father has actually brought him a fan. But this happiness is short-lived. As soon as they switch the fan on, it fails to work. Dickie begins to grow suspicious. He realizes that this too was likely salvaged from the trash, but his father lies. He claims that he paid a good sum for it and that it had been working perfectly fine earlier. In the end, Dickie is forced to go back to using his small handheld fan. At dinner, the father picks up a slightly old apple. He cuts away the rotten parts and gives the good, edible portion to his son. Witnessing this, Dickie gathers his courage and speaks his heart. He says softly, "Father, I need a new pair of shoes." For a moment, the father falls silent, but then he smiles and says, "I will get you a new pair of shoes very soon." For Dickie, that promise means everything. Before going to sleep, the two of them indulge in a bit of playful fun. Their game is peculiar, yet amusing. They play a game of catching and killing the cockroaches hiding within their home. Even amidst their poverty, they manage to find small moments of laughter. The next morning, the two of them stand outside an electronics shop, watching the television display. A strange news story is airing on the TV. A man claims to have spotted a UFO in the sky. However, when he presents the photograph, it is glaringly obvious that it is a fake, as the spaceship bears an uncanny resemblance to the man's own head. In other words, the man is clearly lying. While his father stands outside watching the news, Dickie slowly wanders into a nearby toy shop. The moment he steps inside, his gaze locks onto a specific item. It is that very robot dog, exactly like the one Johnny owns. CJ1! Dickie's eyes light up with delight. He runs back to his father and pleads, "Dad, if you buy me this, I promise I'll never ask for anything else again." But the harsh reality is that his father has no money. He gently tries to reason with him. "Son, put it back." But this time, Dickie refuses to listen. He persists in his demands, and for the first time, his father loses his temper. He slaps him. It is a deeply heartbreaking moment. Dickie silently puts the toy back in its place. Tears well up in his eyes, and sobbing, he runs out of the shop. His father immediately realizes his mistake and chases after him. When he finally catches up with Dickie, he finds him standing with his teacher, Miss Yuan. The teacher speaks to him gently and says that she would like to visit his home, as she believes that parental involvement is essential for the children's education. However, Dickie's father feels ashamed. He feels self-conscious about his circumstances. Consequently, he declines her offer by making an excuse, claiming that he is too busy with work. That night, Dickie's father goes to a garbage dump. He begins searching there for something useful so that he can bring home something nice for his son. He finds an old, yet still serviceable shoe. Then, his eyes fall upon a broken television set. He begins to inspect it. Suddenly, something strange happens. A shiny object emerges from a pile of garbage. A small, flying object that rapidly soars through the sky, but it leaves something behind. A small, green, glowing sphere. Dad doesn't pay much attention and picks it up and brings it home. When he gets home, he happily exclaims, "Dickie, I've got something even better than the CJ1." Dickie runs over, but his joy vanishes as soon as he sees it. It's just a strange, green, jelly-like ball. Still, he decides to take it to school the next day. At school the next day, Johnny comes to tease him again. He asks, "What is this?" Dickie tries to be a little more confident this time and says, "It's the CJ7 and it's even better than your CJ1. Johnny starts laughing. He mocks him and says his father must have picked this up from the garbage. Hearing this, Dickie becomes angry. He warns Johnny, "Don't say anything about my father," but Johnny doesn't stop. He whistles, and within seconds, a huge boy appears. Dragon, many times bigger and stronger than Dickie. Without thinking, the dragon grabs Dickie and throws him away as if he were a toy. That night, Dickie returns home. His clothes are torn. His father scolds him, "You got into a fight again." Dickie sadly explains that everyone makes fun of him because of that useless toy, and as they talk, the atmosphere becomes even more tense because it's no longer just a toy. It's a matter of his self-respect and his father's honor. That green ball suddenly becomes active. It starts moving on its own. Sharp thorns emerge from within it, and then a strange, dark pit begins to open before him, like a small black hole. Dickie is terrified by this. He immediately throws the ball away and screams, "It's cursed! There's a ghost in it!" But his father doesn't take him seriously. He thinks he's just saying anything out of fear, and calmly continues to straighten his uniform. Just then, the cupboard door slowly opens on its own. Dickie looks inside and sees something moving. He screams loudly. His father becomes angry. He thinks Dickie is overreacting. So, as a precaution, he locks alone in the dark. Dickie becomes very frightened. He begins praying to God, "Please save me." And then something magical happens. The green ball begins to glow like a flashlight. The entire atmosphere changes, and Dickie feels as if he has entered another world. In this strange world, he sees a strange creature with a head like a cabbage. The creature fixes broken things with its antennae, but then its energy stone breaks, and the creature turns into a useless toy. Seeing this, Dickie realizes something important. If that energy is restored, the creature can come back to life. Suddenly, the vision ends. Dickie is back in the cupboard, and the green ball has transformed. It has now become a small, alien-like creature. Just then, his father opens the door, and Dickie quickly hides the creature. The next day, as his father leaves for work, Dickie begins to examine the strange creature closely. After a moment of thought, he makes a whimsical decision. He declares, "This is a space dog," and in that very instant, he names him CJ7. Something truly beautiful unfolds that night. Dickie and CJ7 play together, laugh, and even dance. Perhaps for the first time in his life, Dickie feels genuinely happy. Then, CJ7 discovers a rotten apple. Using his peculiar powers, he restores it to perfect freshness. Dickie is astonished when he takes a bite. He is now convinced that this is no ordinary toy. It is a magical dog. The next day at school, Dickie carries CJ7 on his shoulder with immense pride. He wants to put him to the test. He tells him, "If you can defeat the toughest dog in school, then you truly are a super dog." CJ immediately dashes off and, amazingly, he defeats the other dog with ease. Dickie is absolutely ecstatic. For the first time ever, he walks through the school hallways with confidence, but then he is about to make a mistake. Hiding out in the restroom, he gets a mischievous idea. He asks CJ7, "Help me get a perfect score on my exam." CJ7 pulls out his tiny toolkit and constructs a special pair of glasses for him. During the exam, tiny robots emerge from the glass classes. They scan the other students' answer sheets and relay all the answers directly to Dickie. Everything is going perfectly until Johnny notices something odd. He spots the tiny robots flying around. Johnny is stunned by the sight of the little robots. Driven by a mix of anger and curiosity, he attempts to catch them. However, in the midst of this commotion, he accidentally ends up hitting the teacher instead. Meanwhile, another girl, Fanny, also makes up an excuse, claiming she was merely trying to catch a fly. This sparks an uproar throughout the entire class. Chaos ensues everywhere. Yet, amidst all this noise and pandemonium, Dickie calmly finishes his test. A short while later, the results are announced, and for the very first time, Dickie receives an A grade. He is absolutely ecstatic. He feels a surge of pride in himself. However, this happiness does not last long. The teacher suddenly demands to see his glasses. Dickie panics. He hurriedly tosses the glasses over to the teacher. Just as the teacher reaches out to inspect them, boom! The glasses explode. Everyone is terrified. Although no one is injured, everyone now begins to grow suspicious. Later, Dickie meets up with CJ7 again. He explains that he has gym class next and needs super shoes. Within just a few seconds, CJ7 creates a special pair of shoes for him. During gym class, the teacher demonstrates his best jump, proudly declaring that no student has ever managed to beat his record. Just then, Dickie steps forward and, wearing his new shoes, effortlessly jumps even higher than that record. Everyone is left completely astounded. The teacher lowers the bar and challenges him to try again, but this time, Dickie jumps even higher still. Things start getting weird on the treadmill. His shoes suddenly sprout mechanical legs and he runs so fast that the machine itself breaks down. At the swimming pool, propellers extend from his shoes, and Dickie begins to glide through the water like a speedboat. During football practice, his kick is so powerful that it shatters the goalpost. By now, the teacher realizes that something is definitely amiss. He challenges Dickie, but surprisingly, Dickie defeats even him. Just then, Miss UN arrives on the scene. She informs the teacher that Dickie is getting himself into serious trouble. Meanwhile, another teacher, Mr. Cow, approaches the grounds accompanied by the police. But before they can catch Dickie, he takes flight with the help of his shoes. And suddenly, Dickie wakes up. There is a piece of apple in his mouth. He looks around and realizes that it was all just a dream. Just then, his father comes home and he is told to hurry up and get ready for school. But just then, Dickie spots CJ7 inside his bag. Now he is confused. The dream might have been a lie, but CJ7 is definitely real. He begins to believe once again that CJ7 might actually be able to help him. On his way to school, he stops near an alleyway where a real dog lives. He thinks to himself, let's put it to the test. He sends CJ7 in to fight the other dog. But this time, everything goes wrong. The real dog attacks ferociously and easily flings CJ7 aside. Now both Dickie and CJ7 are forced to flee the scene. Witnessing this, Dickie is heartbroken. He feels that his space dog isn't quite as special as he had hoped. Gradually, his faith begins to waver. Dickie takes CJ7 with him to school, though this time he is seething with anger. Heading into the restroom, he yells at CJ7, "Get me a perfect score again!" But this time, CJ7 fails to do anything extraordinary. Instead, it merely creates something utterly foolish, a pile of filth. Yet, Dickie refuses to give up hope. He sneaks CJ7 into the exam hall and spends the entire duration of the test staring intently at it, but nothing happens. The time runs out, and he hasn't managed to write a single word. Now he begins to panic. Just then, Johnny looks over at him, and mocking him cruelly, flings the pile of filth right into his face. This moment shatters Dickie to the core. In a fit of rage, he grabs CJ7 and shoves its head down the toilet bowl. "You betrayed me!" he screams. Yet CJ7 continues to react in its usual playful, comical manner. Things only go from bad to worse during gym class. When Dickie gets dirty, the teacher calls the gardener and has him spray water on him with a hose. All the children laugh. Dickie cannot bear this humiliation. In a fit of rage, he goes off to find CJ7. This time, he calls out to him affectionately as if he has forgiven him. Trusting him, CJ7 comes out, but suddenly Dickie picks him up and throws him into a trash can. He then walks away. However, after taking just a few steps, his heart grows heavy. He realizes that the fault wasn't CJ7's. He himself had simply been expecting too much. He runs back in haste, but by then, the garbage truck has already hauled everything away. Dickie chases after it, weeping and screaming, but no one stops. Upon reaching home, he is utterly devastated. Sobbing, he tells his father that he has lost his toy. Just then, his father remarks that a strange creature had entered the house, almost as if it were waiting for him. And right at that moment, CJ7 suddenly leaps out and appears before them, acting as if nothing at all had happened. Dickie is overjoyed to see him. His father, however, grows suspicious. He twists and squeezes CJ7. He even goes so far as to pin him down beneath a heavy iron plate. Yet, CJ7 remains completely unharmed. The father is terrified. He wants to destroy the creature, but Dickie stops him. That night, unable to sleep due to the sweltering heat, Dickie tosses and turns. Suddenly, CJ7 uses his antenna to repair their broken electric fan, and a cool breeze begins to blow. However, in doing so, CJ7 becomes severely weakened. The next morning, the father is astonished to find that the fan has been fixed. Meanwhile, Dickie shows him his test results. 100 marks. Dad is delighted, but the truth cannot remain hidden for long. The boss reveals that the grades had been altered. Upon returning home, Dad demands the truth. This time, Dickie does not lie. He confesses everything. Dad is deeply disappointed and confiscates CJ7, telling Dickie that he won't get it back until he scores above 60 marks. Dickie now resolves to work hard for real. Meanwhile, his father is working at a perilous height when a sudden, terrible accident occurs. He falls to his death. At school, Dickie is overjoyed that he has achieved good results entirely on his own merit. But just then, Miss Yuan takes him to the hospital, where he learns the devastating truth. His world shatters. Returning home, he weeps, murmuring, "If I just go to sleep, Dad will come back." Yet, deep down, he knows the truth. That night, CJ7 emerges and, despite its tiny frame, attempts to save Dickie's father. It repeatedly expends its energy in the effort. Finally, at dawn, a miracle occurs. Dickie sees his father, alive. He rushes over and embraces him tightly. However, this miracle comes at a cost. CJ7 has become severely weakened. A glowing orb falls from its antenna, and it reverts to being a mere toy. It never moves again. Dickie carries it with him everywhere, clinging to the hope that it will come back to life. Sometime later, during a picnic, Dickie spots a UFO in the sky. Suddenly, CJ7's antenna begins to glow once more, and hundreds of tiny creatures resembling CJ7 descend, as if his family has come to take him home. And with this glimmer of hope, the story concludes. This was the story of a poor child, his hardworking father, and a little magical friend who changed his life forever. If you liked this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.